Hey, what's up? So Reels, I watched the autopsy of Joan Laurer, the last days of Joan Laurer, which of course is Chyna. I'm not going to go through the entire episode. Obviously, this is just going to be some news and notes and different things that I saw that I found interesting. If you're listening to this, you're probably a wrestling fan, so I don't need to go into the granular details of a lot of the things that people found particularly interesting in terms of wrestling. You know, so we already know Chyna's career, what she did, and all these sorts of stuff. So we don't really need to go into that. But let's talk about some interesting things. One of the things is her body when she died was actually pretty interesting. Well, she had a lot of alcohol and drugs in her system. A lot of the drugs that she had were within therapeutic range, so it was just a mixture of various drugs that was in her system at the time. Her body also showed a lot of long term long term anabolic steroid abuse. She had what's called what's this nephrosclerosis, which is the hardening of the blood vessels in both of her kidneys. And she it says that basically she was under a lot of pressure to maintain her physique, which for obvious reasons. Her drug and alcohol abuse is likely tied into her upbringing, which was of course very tragic. And her dad was an alcoholic. That she saw a lot of domestic abuse in her household. That she then also had three abusive stepdads. That she separated from her mom when she was 15, and she didn't see her mom for 30 years or something like that. And that's really exceptionally scarring. And that she also was abused by a teacher. She was kissed in the mouth or something like that by a male teacher when she was 10 years old. So you talk about somebody with extensive psychological issues, and that's that's really scary, and these cause insecurity and self-esteem issues, which they talked about in the documentary. They talked about in the show rather. I don't know if it's fair to call it a documentary. That she had high levels of insecurity and self-esteem issues, and that these issues started before she started wrestling, because she was a muscular girl who liked to work out. She wasn't really well accepted by her mom, which is a very low key thing that's mentioned in here. It wasn't like, of course, they wanted to talk about the steroids and the drugs and stuff like that, but the emotional abuse that she faced was can't be denied. There was a lot of that stuff going on. And her mom thinking that she was a lesbian, and people bullying her, saying that she looked like a man, and all that sort of stuff. That stuff is was really interesting, and because I didn't know about it before. I mean, I don't have time to sit back and look at autopsy reports, even though you could do that. But here's the thing that's important for people to learn about autopsy reports and different criminalistics and forensics and stuff like this. They are always going to say consistent with. So if you ever hear somebody say that blankety blank is consistent with something, what they mean is they can't say for sure that blankety blank or whatever happened. They just can say it's consistent with it. So in let's say the case of the nephrosclerosis or whatever the hell it's called in her kidneys, they can't say it's due to steroid abuse. They could just say it's consistent with steroid abuse. In other words, other people who have abused steroids also have the same thing. They also found a lot of course, she had extensive bone spurs in her due to her, I think, her broken neck and various wrestling injuries. And of course, for that, she was also pounding painkillers. And painkillers is a motherfucker, man. Like that stuff, that stuff is really killing off a lot of wrestlers, man. The painkillers. I don't know. There's no way around it other than to ban pain in wrestling, which is virtually impossible. So the bulk of the story is that Chyna wanted to sort of be welcomed back to the WWE and want to be welcomed back into sort of being a celebrity, even though she had become a complete and total train wreck. But a lot of the more salacious things about Chyna were not mentioned in the episode. There was no mention of her doing porn. There was absolutely no mention of her porn. There was one mention of anything remotely close to porn, which is that she was in Playboy. That was it. They said, oh, well, she did Playboy, and she was the highest selling at the time or something like that. Maybe, I don't know if she still is, but she was one of the highest selling at the time. But there was no talk of the porn, which I did some independent research, and I could tell you that people who abuse their bodies the way Chyna did, as far as doing porn and stuff like that, usually they have, I can say, let me use weasel words too. It's consistent with people who are abusing themselves, and that's also what they found with Chyna, is that she was suicidal. She often cut herself. There was a lot of cuts on her body. There was 4 suicide attempts since she left WWE. So from 2001 to 2016, when she died, she tried to kill herself 4 different times. And that led people to believe that maybe she was trying to kill herself when she actually died. That maybe there was a suicide, she had killed herself on purpose. Even though the doctor on the TV said that he didn't think so, because everything was in, all the drugs and things that within her body was within therapeutic range. They also didn't mention Chyna being on reality TV, which she was on reality TV. Because those were really, really down moments. But they didn't mention that stuff. They didn't mention when she got arrested for breaking Sean Waltman's nose. That was interesting. I forgot all about that. But her and X-Pac were a mess together. It was also talked about that methamphetamines was one of Chyna's drugs of choice. But there was no methamphetamines in her system. They also said that she might have been clean when she was in Japan. She was in Japan for quite a while. Of course, that might not be true, but she certainly was, well, there's just no way of knowing. There was some claims that she was somewhat clean when she went to Japan, but when she came back to the United States, and then she had that run-in Stanford when she went to the WWE offices, tried to talk to Vince McMahon, and she got sent home. She got sent out. That kind of ruined her mental state, and she spun out of control. And then she was really upset. They also talked about her being upset about not being inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. And 2016 in particularly bothered her, because I think that's what she went to Stanford for, is that she was also trying to film this documentary that she wanted to, of course, reclaim her former glory. But she had kind of ruined her brand to a great extent with the porn and the reality TV stuff and all the arrests and a lot of the crazy stuff that she had done. She really had not figured out that she had pretty much ruined her name. And that's really sad. But I found all of that stuff to be really interesting. Another thing that I found interesting is that she wanted it for the documentary. She wanted the manager, Alonzo Anthony something or other. I didn't write his name down, but he was trying to put together this documentary. He wanted to reunite Chyna with her mom, and Chyna flew out for a autograph signing, and she was doing the autograph signing, and the mom was supposed to come up there, and they were going to film the reunion between her and her mom after 30 years. But then Chyna got drunk and sent her mom some crazy text messages or emails or something like that, and her mom called and refused to show up. So her and her mom did not see each other at all from when Chyna was 15 to when she died, and she died at 45. So please, if you are beefing with your family members, please fix it. If it can be fixed, or if you can just get on, just speak in terms. Please try, because you don't want that. 'Cause that's really sad. And another sad thing is, I was going to go through this story, but I decided not to, because it's really ugly. But Chyna's mom threatened to sue Reelz for this episode, and saying that they didn't have a right to use Chyna's likeness. And even this also needs to be said. There was nobody that I could recognize from the wrestling business involved in this documentary. It was all of Chyna's friends or her alleged friends, just people that she knew, I guess. So there was like not anybody, like there certainly wasn't no Triple H or anybody like that in this documentary. So I found that interesting. So there was a lot of talk about, of course, this documentary that Chyna was making. And one of her friends said that maybe Chyna going through this documentary and talking about all of the things that she went through, her entire life and everything, that maybe that caused some substantial trauma in her life. And well, at the time, because she was kind of starting to get over things. Of course, everybody thought that she was cool after she came from Japan. And that's when she hired her manager and all that type of stuff. And she was trying to be mellow. And of course, she spurged out in Stanford, and then she went to Las Vegas and started partying and doing meth and drinking and stuff. But I can see how that could be. I can see how you sitting down talking about, a teacher molesting you and being made fun of because you're a big muscular woman. And then also, Chyna was not the most feminine looking woman. I understand that a lot of people think that she was, but she wasn't. Before the surgeries, Chyna had a very strong jaw. And I could see how she would have these self-esteem issues. And so when people start to sort of nitpick at her about her body type, she would overcompensate. That's where she get the breast implants and stuff like that. And then want to be seen as being sexy. So you do the Playboy, you do the porn. And, these sorts of things are dangerous. It's very hard to say, like, when you talk about the body positivity movement, I think that's the kind of thing you should be talking about. We're talking about people who do have atypical body types, like a muscular woman, who would likely get made fun of for being a muscular woman, just like a skinny man would be made fun of, or a fat man. Even though I don't think fat guys get made fun of a lot, even though I got made fun of a lot when I was a kid, but not as often as like huge fat women. So they also talked about they wanted to look at her brain. So the Sports Legacy Institute that is run by Chris Nowitzki, they try to do the CTE testing. So one of the things that they found in this documentary, or this TV show, is that Chyna was dead for 3 days before anybody found her. So her brain was too damaged and too decomposed for the CTE test to test. So they didn't really get to really look and see if she had CTE. But a lot of the drugs and various head injuries that she might have suffered could have led to her dying and her death, which is something that's also really interesting to talk about. So it was all in all, it was a really interesting documentary. If you could find it, you should watch it. It's sad. It's like particularly sad, of course, but it's also enlightening, because you can see how somebody, it's a fall from grace without the bounce back. Usually you see a celebrity, they fall from grace because they all do. They all hit that bottom, and then you hope that they bounce back up. And you can see that Chyna was trying to do that. After her self-imposed exile to Japan, she was trying to bounce back. She was trying to get clean. She was trying to do the right thing. But maybe she had damaged herself socially, especially in the United States, so badly, with not Playboy, but the porn and the domestic abuse stuff, and looking really bad on reality TV. Like that reality TV show was so bad. It made her and Walkman look like fucking fools, man. Like it was horrible, absolutely horrible. And I can see why WWE, which at the time was coming fresh off the Chris Benoit story and the Eddie Guerrero deaths and all that type of stuff, they didn't want to have anything to do with Chyna. And I'm pretty sure it has something to do with maybe the whole. It's bizarre that Stephanie and Triple H and Chyna, that whole scenario being the ugly situation that it is. I'm pretty sure that had a part in it. But I think also that Triple H is correct, is that it's the porn. The porn thing is really damaging. I don't know what else to say, but just knowing that somebody used their name to do something as crazy as porn, and kind of link your company to it, was kind of bizarre. Like, even though WWE for a long time linked themselves to porn, when you talk about the Playboy and stuff, but you really kind of get a it's fascinating. So when, Chyna's mom is like, I don't understand people's fascinations with, digging up her dark side. And I say, well, people are always going to be interested in the deaths, life and deaths of celebrities. Chyna is no different. And then the wrestling audience is so passionate that we will watch the show in droves. And like most of the time, people will watch this episode or watch the Chris Benoit episode of Reelz, and they will probably never watch the show again. They just watch the wrestling stuff, which makes sense. But it was particularly interesting. It was really interesting. And she had a long and storied career, and Chyna should be remembered for what she did in the ring, and hopefully not for all the. But she was only in the ring for 5 years. She from 1997 to 2001. She was a train wreck for a lot longer than she was an actual star. Which is usually the case in wrestling, because stars, Brian, they shine very bright in the WWE, but they don't shine very long. Like The Rock's long run was not that long. Austin's run was not that long. Usually you get a good run out of them, and then they go away. And Chyna was outside of the WWE locker room for 15 years. She was only in it for 5. So she still had a good run, but hopefully it becomes a cautionary tale. Even though no matter how many wrestlers die from abusing drugs and alcohol, there's always somebody on the cusp right now. And I wish that wasn't the case, but it kind of is what it is. People are adults, but it's very difficult because you never really know what's going on in people's minds and what's going on in their hearts. And I do wish that Chyna had been saved and she had bounced back. But it's hard to tell what situation would have fixed it. What going into the 2016 Hall of Fame had fixed it? Probably not. She might have. But you also have to look at things in a strange way, because WWE did kind of put the ice on Scott Hall and Jake Roberts until they proved that they were clean. And maybe that's really what it was, that they kind of wanted to see. They also didn't mention that I think Chyna showed up to Roddy Piper's funeral, which was not mentioned at all in the documentary either, which I think is important because it ties into how she was trying to ingratiate herself to WWE again. She supposedly spurred out at Roddy Piper's funeral, which is really bizarre. Okay, that's a lot of bizarre behavior, man. She showed up in Stanford. She was asked to leave. She refused. She, showed up at Roddy Piper's funeral and confronted Triple H and went off on him. She had been making all sorts of comments since she left. She called Vince McMahon a bully, and she talked shit about Stephanie. She talked shit about Triple H, and she got into this whole fight with X-Pac and broke his nose, and she did porn, and she was banging meth and drinking, and she was on like 6 different prescriptions and painkillers, and a lot of this stuff, man, is just so sad. And it's so, it shows you just how rough the wrestling life can be. If you saw this documentary, let me know. Hit like and share this video. Leave a comment if you can, and let's discuss this. Let's talk about it, and more importantly, let's celebrate Chyna for what she was during those 5 years between 1997 and 2001, and try not to dwell too much on what she became afterwards. All right, peace.